Hello, this is the front desk.
Hello and welcome back to episode 22 of the Cracking Backs podcast with your hosts, Dr. Terry Wyman and Dr. Spencer Barron. How you doing today, guys?
I'm doing great, Lance. Thanks. Hey, buddy.
Doing great. So joining us today is Chris Mancini. And Chris here is he's a writer, he's a director, he's a comedian, he's a podcaster, he's everything rolled into one. He's written comedy, horror, graphic novels, all these different books, and they're all more related than you would think. How you doing today, Chris?
Good. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the theme song too. It felt like a porn waiting room.
That's what we were going for.
Yeah.
There it goes.
There it is. Right from the start. I love it.
See, Chris, we hesitated having a comedian and a writer and a podcaster on, but you know what? We're throwing ourselves into the fire with this new endeavor we're doing to help people out. And I'm like, oh, do I go with a comedian and experienced guy who's going to eat me alive? You know what? Might as well. And we have, but the cool thing is we have this East Coast, West Coast kind of thing going. And you're actually from the East Coast, aren't you?
I am. And I've actually lived for longer in the West Coast, so I feel like I'm like a East Coast, West Coast moderate.
Yeah. So you can have fun at both, ends and all that. I got, before we go into, so one of the reasons, obviously we talk to healthcare providers and we talk to, we're trying to educate not only chiropractors, but other healthcare providers on different ways of handling and dealing with people and different things. But I gotta first ask you, what got you into comedy? And now you tell me you've been writing for the NFL. So how did all that start?
I always loved making people laugh, even when I was like super young, like as a teenager. And the thing that got me into comedy was really actually the writing, because that was always the most appealing part of comedy for me, was like constructing the jokes, creating the stories. And it was the most immediate way to hit an audience, was to go on stage and tell them. You didn't have to submit your jokes to a magazine or, try to get published. It was like, no, I could write jokes, go on stage, and I'll know literally instantly if they are liked or not. So you get the instant feedback. And it was also the part that I always kind of leaned into. So as I started launching and embarking on my stand-up career, I started in when I was 20. So I was actually playing nightclubs that I legally wasn't allowed to be in because I was under 21. So then I started touring, and then I came out to LA and kind of leaned more into writing. And then, podcasting was an unexpected turn. I spent literally over a decade as a podcaster, and still going, of course. But it was one of those things that, when you start doing stand up in clubs like in Ohio and Pennsylvania, you think, someday I'm going to sit at home with a buddy of mine, and we're going to talk to people in Australia, and they're going to enjoy what we have to say. But it's really interesting. It's like, I'm sure you guys, you have listeners that you'd never even guess that are literally all over the world.
We would like to believe that. Yes.
Everybody's got backs. Yeah.
Everything's got backs. And when you and I met, I remember, God, you were going to put me, actually tell the audience how you and I met.
Is it PG
rated? We actually
rated?
met, yeah.
You never know, Spence. You never know where this is going to go.
Well, my job is to embellish, so we'll see. My wife worked for Amgen, so all of her doctors were out in Thousand Oaks, and I'm like, I I had a torn abdominal muscle that no one could seem to heal. And I went to like a stomach doctor. I went to a couple other doctors. Like, yeah, everyone knew what it was. It was a torn stomach muscle. A couple people, like one doctor gave me pills. I'm like, I don't see how that's going to help. And then one doctor said to me, well, it's a torn stomach muscle. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's when I went, I'm sure there's something you can do about it. Yeah. And I didn't really take that as a definite answer. And I talked to my wife and she's like, I got a great chiropractor over in Thousand Oaks and he also does sports medicine. And I went to see you. And then what was funny is when we first met, you had a very somber tone, like you weren't sure, like as a new patient, like how to make of somebody. Like I felt like it was almost like I got to size the patient up before I can let the guard down, because what if he doesn't like if I'm funny? What if he doesn't like that I'm casual? And because you're already at a disadvantage as a chiropractor, you use your first name after the word, after doctor. So you're already, it's like, it already feels more casual. But so I went and I told you my story. I was like, this is where it hurts. And then you looked at me, you went... I can make you 80% better in one session.
That's the embellishing part.
Yeah. And sure enough, after that one session, you did the muscle treatments and the therapies and the adjustments, and it was the best I had felt in about 6 to 8 months. And then we went on a program to actually heal the muscle and make it better. And it worked. So it was one of those things where, it's a good life lesson. If one person says you can't do it or they can't do it, what it really means is they don't know how to do it, or they're not aware that someone else can do it. And it really is, there's different ways to look at everything, especially health and medicine.
Yeah,
that's great.
But, I wouldn't go to you if I was in a car accident, but that kind of thing. You go to the ER, but it's different things that you that you go for.
And I remember when you go, hey, I'm going to put you in my book, and I just went, oh no, you're a comedian. What? And then between the book and then we went and saw you on stage, I'm like, oh God, a comedian and his chiropractor in the audience. What can go wrong, right? Yeah. And I'm like, please don't pick on me. Please don't pick on me. Please don't pick on me.
Yeah, those were the days of Vegas comedy. I was there like 4 times a year, something like that.
Wow, that's great.
Vegas is fun unless you're there 4 times a year. Then you're like, it's work. But it was always fun. I love when people are like in Vegas when I'm there, so I could like, oh no, bring your friends, plenty of free tickets, and it was always like a big party and a fun time.
That's nice.
That's true. It was. Go ahead, Spence.
No, I actually was gonna ask how Chris injured his stomach, but his stomach muscles. But I don't even want to know.
It's a great story. Yeah, I wish it was something like super exciting, like I was playing High or something like that, or I was something really like, oh, that's really interesting. I want to hear that story. I tore an abdominal muscle playing tennis, and I used to say in my act when I said that, it's like one of the muscles got scared. I was using the other ones, so it's like, shut him down before he uses us all. So.
Oh no way!
But didn't you also in the book talk about coming in and you bring your kids in for like colds and health? Wasn't there something about that in there?
Wow, that's.
I don't think that was in. That might have been in my book. It's been years, so I forget what I put in my book. This was Pacify Me, a handbook for the freaked out new dad, and about being a new dad and going on that journey. But I'm sure I've talked about that as far as like bringing kids in, especially for colds and to stimulate their immunities and things like that. But yeah, I'm a big proponent of it for sure. I don't know if I put it in print, but yeah, I believe it.
Yeah. And how did you get in NFL? I know you're right, and you've written horror stories too. I mean,
I have.
Yeah. So
that was his treatment with you. That was the horror story.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Although, to be fair, that did inspire the episode that we did together with
yeah,
bringing my
did.
daughter in and like chiropractic. Like, what if chiropractic care was actually helping a teenager not to turn into something horrifying? So
Yes.
it went that way. But
It was.
yeah.
Look how good Lance turned out. Come on.
But yeah, it's one of those things where like I just love writing. So anything from like books, comics to a horror movie to an act for stand up. I just love doing all of it. And even writing for the NFL, I would always try to put like where's the story that we can tell, even if it's just ad copy or a script for like an Apple keynote. Like, what's the story of the players? What's the story of the game? What's the story of how it connects to the actual fans? So I really think there's a relationship there, especially when you get into marketing copy. If you get into the story, it makes it feel a lot more sincere. So I feel like, from doing so many scripts and script writing, I feel like it kind of gives me a leg up on just writing cynical copy to make people buy things. I'm like, well, there's something else here. Let's explore it. And but the horror movie was like some ridiculous thing that kind of happened. I mean, I've had a lot of horror stuff in development, but I actually had one bought and they made it in Bulgaria, threw my script away, destroyed it. They came back to me to try to fix it. And I actually ended up making it like a horror comedy. And then I thought, oh, well, they're going to bury it. There's no way that's going to get released. Oh, no, it's out there. It's Lionsgate picked it up and you can watch it like on all these different places. It's called Asylum and it's got really funny reviews and really horrifying reviews, because when I remade it to a horror comedy, they never rebranded it. So the horror fans still think they were getting a horror movie. And the comedy fans who listen to my podcast and know me think it's hilarious what I did with it. But the people that didn't know that are confused and angry after they watched it. As I said, rename it. Just call it Death of a Horror Movie, because it shows how a film company destroys a horror movie. And we did like some Mystery Science Theater stuff in there. But if you don't know that going in, you're going to be furious.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. Hey, Chris, I'm just curious. This might be off the beaten path from our main topic, but I always wondered, when writing for the NFL, you made a comment about featuring, a storyline, and because the audience loves the behind the scenes stuff. So when we hear about all that crazy stuff that goes on with a player or a team owner, does that really, that obviously, I guess no news is even bad news is good news. Is that how that works? Is that how you write?
Well, it wasn't my department. That was, I was more the overall marketing and ad copy, like more of like the story of the NFL, the story of how players interact with it, things like that. Like, in fact, they told me specifically, don't get into like specific players or teams, because the stuff I did was more broad and overall. But I can sure there were many conversations like that in other departments. Yeah. How do we spin this? How do we make this palatable? And all right, there's a team, they have rooms just filled with PR people and lawyers that their job is to figure all this out.
Right. So, go ahead, Terry.
Go ahead.
I
you
was just
and I
gonna
talked a lot.
go.
We do this all the time. You and I talked a lot about the correlation between comedy and horror.
Yes.
And how close that is, and that's going to lead into kind of where I want to go a little bit. But why are great comedians also tell great horror stories, and why great guys that write a lot of horror and all that also can be great comedians? Why is that so brother sister? Why does that work?
Because it's two sides of the same coin, humor, laughter, and horror, and they all kind of stimulate an emotional response. They just go in different directions. And when a lot of comedians too, it's like a lot of artists, they've had a lot of stuff happen to them in their lives, and this is kind of how they kind of filter it and translate it and how it comes back out. Like, you take greats like Richard Pryor and all the things, or George Carlin, the things that they observed and the things that they've been through. It just kind of comes through in their work. Whereas with horror, it's kind of the same thing. Like, if you look at some of these horror writers, when they speak, they're hilarious. Like, when they do interviews and stuff. And it's really interesting. Like, oh, gosh, somebody who writes such somber, horrifying things, how could they have such a good sense of humor? And it's all related because it all kind of works the same muscle in different directions. Basically, it stimulates an emotional response.
Actually, I was taught an interesting thing in comedy. Now, again, keep your minds clean when I tell you that we were taught.
Impossible.
Yeah, right.
What's the rating on this show? Is it is it explicit? Is it clean? Or is it, not rated? Yeah.
Lance, I don't know. What do you think? Where it goes?
It's unrated, I would say.
Okay, fair game.
Although it would be severely R-rated if I didn't do my job well.
Well, with that said, I was taught there's a approach to comedy called the suck and slap method. And I was fascinated because, of course, my mind went in the wrong direction.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, how could that be misconstrued? That's so weird. Yeah.
Well,
I wonder how anyone could take that the wrong way. To me, that's just a Tuesday.
All right. I'll clean it up.
Okay, Mrs. Jenkins, for your treatment today, we're going to be calling this the Dirty Sanchez. Now, I know it sounds weird, but it will help your back.
And for your lower back, we'll be doing the Tokyo Sandblaster.
Yeah. Holy night. I need to get a fan in this room here. Well, I'm going to ruin it for everybody. The suck and slap method was you have to be a good storyteller, so you suck them into the story and then you slap them with this punchline or this, unexpected end of the story. So that was really, I think it was funnier when I left it to your imagination.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that kind of got rebranded as premise and punchline.
Yeah.
But the thought is exactly the same. Yes, for sure, because that's what it is. You have to suck people in with the premise, and then the punchline is is the kicker.
Well, I think yours is more PG rated than. Oh, but there is no rating anymore, so that's all right.
Yeah, there's no rating anymore. Well,
oh my God! Back to the subject at hand.
Exactly. One of the reasons I brought that up, Chris, and I don't want to go too into depth, but a lot of people don't view, like you talked about how you met me, abdominal tear. People don't think about going to a chiropractor for abdominal tear. They think of us as back crackers. But you also have come to me, as well as colds. You also have come to me for something else, and I think 2020 and 2021 brought that into highlight. You came to me with some, every now and then people in your industry will get anxiety, and it's just normal. And but people don't think about going to a chiropractor to help with that. How did that transport? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't look at our profession for that world, and I think it helps a lot of people out there. And so, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Absolutely. And we had some really great discussions about this that I think that, if you, in your copious free time, you should really write all that out and present it on a website about mental health and chiropractic care. And what was interesting is it wasn't like, you crack your back, you're not anxious anymore. When you go through the science of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, and one is short circuiting basically through anxiety. And then, the adjusting can actually adjust that and get you back on track. I mean, there were times when I was elevated with the height of an anxiety attack, I would go in, and after treatments, you and I both saw my body just literally calm down, and the tremors would stop, and I would stop with the heightened anxiety. But what I think is important is that there's numerous different treatments for anxiety. Some people respond well to medication. Great, if that's good for them. But if some people can't take medication, like I couldn't, there's other great treatments. When I combined your care with meditation and eating better and getting more exercise. Like all of those things combined create like a shotgun overall effect. Whereas if they'd be a lot more effective if I like just did one thing. All right, well, I'll eat better and do nothing else. Well, that may not have the same effect. But what I loved about coming to you for anxiety too is it was almost like emergency treatment too. Like, oh, this is too much. Nothing else is working. I can come into the chiropractor. Dr. Terry can adjust me. It'll tamp everything down. Then I can go back and exercise and meditate. But when things are really bad in the middle of an anxiety attack, you can't do anything. I mean, there were times where I couldn't even drive to you, where my wife would actually take me and she would go to work and then I would actually take an Uber back after I would feel better. So chiropractic, you don't always think of as like emergency treatment, but for certain things it can be, and because it would actually maybe reset me for the week or whatever, and it was super effective. But I also liked us just kind of talking about the science of it, of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, because the more knowledge you have about what's going on in your body, the more you can understand it. Because the thing about anxiety is it spirals. So like, I don't understand what's going on. Now I feel even worse. So like every little thing from the treatments to the discussions to the knowledge and the education helped tremendously.
And I think that's something that, I mean, and Spencer deals with this with, in the East, even, athletes, pre-game, post-game, when they're in slumps, and they never think about going to guys like, chiropractors for that. And then in your industry, I mean, gosh, getting on stage and trying to be on it every night and trying to write when you get writer's block. There's so much stuff, I think, out there, and people don't hear those stories very much. So from a guy who's gone through anxiety, why do you think people don't talk about it and talk about other alternatives? Is it embarrassment? Is it lack of knowledge? What do you think it is?
Yes. It's like a combination of all.
I didn't know that was multiple choice. That was good. I really think it's one from column A, one from column B, where it's the knowledge isn't necessarily out there. And one of the things too is because with the pandemic and everything else, mental illness, especially anxiety, has skyrocketed. So you don't have the the generalized knowledge of alternative treatments or what else can work, or even the science of what causes anxiety. Like, chiropractic aside, like just, I'm feeling awful, what's wrong with me? Like we're at a deficit there too, where people don't even identify that they're having anxiety or whatever, let alone how to treat it. So I think there's a lot of ground we still need to cover with education on what it is and what causes it, and also with treatment as well. So I think it's a combination of all those things. That is
great.
This could actually be one of my favorite podcasts, because we're embarking on areas that I absolutely love that a lot of people don't know. And it's, Chris, it's difficult sometimes for a chiropractor to announce and proclaim that he's helped things like diabetes and or anxiety, or things that you wouldn't typically go to a chiropractor for other than low back and neck pain. But the patients can make those testimonials. But we get crucified if we start promoting that. Like Terry's embarking on treating hemorrhoids now, so I can't wait to see the results to that.
Thank God that Spencer and I are hooking up in a few weeks in Vegas, because what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Oh my God.
Oh. Well, every time I go to Dr. Terry, there's a new machine in the corner that he can't wait to try out.
Yeah, you gotta try out the new suck and slap machine.
Yeah.
The suck and slap machine's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This one's called the suck and slap. I don't know if you've heard of this one. So, yeah.
Just put it. All you have to do is you have to put on this gimp suit. You'll be fine. Just black leather, and then put it on the nozzle. You'll be good.
The nozzle. Yeah.
Oh man, no, that was colon cleansing machine that he had in there. I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey, we are on the West Coast, baby.
Yeah.
On the East Coast, where everybody's got tight sphincters, that's a whole nother story. Oh my God! Oh, too funny. Good stuff.
So, Chris, a lot of people view comedians as, you guys are always happy and all that stuff, but there is,
Not anymore.
Yeah,
I think people kind of know. They've been on Twitter. Yeah.
Oh my God. That's great.
I guess, and that's what makes, I think you and I have talked about, that's what makes some of my favorite comedians great, is when they just talk about life. They're not dropping F-bombs, they're not doing this, they just tell life stories. Because, we all have to learn to laugh at each other and laugh at our own, greatnesses and defeats as well, because if we can't laugh at our own mistakes, and you'll see that as these podcasts progress, Spencer and I throw each other under the bus all the time, but it's because we love each other and there's no intent.
It's like Dave Chappelle. It's like Dave Chappelle said, everyone has a worthwhile human experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we're all humans. Yeah, and it's interesting that when the podcast boom started, it was driven a lot in part by comedians and comedians doing interviews or talking to each other and being funny. It's like, oh, this is what comedians talk about when they're not on stage, and so you got kind of like a glimpse behind the curtain of how a comedian talks and acts in real life. And what it really was is all the conversations I've had with other comedians in the green rooms, like before shows. That's really what a lot of these podcasts were, and they were brought out into the public. And it turns out people were almost even more interested in that than the actual stand-up show. Yeah. So it was really interesting.
It's so funny you mentioned that. The reason I started this podcast is both Spencer and I, lecture, and we were talking over summer. I go, you know what? The lectures are great, but what happens after the lectures, when we're all sitting around the lounge or the dinner afterwards, that's when the best pearls happen. And I was like, do I want to sit there and talk to a group of people in the room, or do I want to talk to thousands of people and give them the real pearls that happen after the lectures? And so the fact that you just said comedians, they want to hear in the green room, that's kind of what started this thing, only for the healthcare side. Because a lot of the guests we have and the stories we go, they can help a lot of people and cover so many topics that you can't get in an hour lecture or a 2-hour lecture. And I think that is what my premise for this whole podcast is, just giving everything from the student to the older doctor so many pearls every week they never would think about getting in a talk. And so it got funny. That's what you said, that how you think podcasts kind of got going. It's the same premise that we want to do.
And it's a great thing for the healthcare industry, too, because we've had these conversations where, like, well, why don't chiropractors and, say like an MD, why isn't information kind of shared where there's a case that no one can really figure out? Maybe somebody's kind of figured out a solution. And I remember you telling me there's not a lot of sharing information across different platforms and practices, which is a shame, because I think more things could get diagnosed quicker if that were the case.
Great.
Well, even on a smaller microcosm, when a patient comes in, and for example, think about it, Chris. When you came in with anxiety to any of the doctors, did they ever bother calling the doctor you saw prior to that and find out what they did in order to manage or not duplicate or reduce the curiosities and questions that they have? So, that's another thing. Insurance has driven doctors to spend less time with their patients. So the thought of them, meeting you as the new doc, and then, the new patient, and then, hey, let me find out what this other doctor did, or the other doctor did, or whatever, it might be. But they don't do that anymore. So even on a smaller scale,
it's a really good idea. I never even thought of it that way, because the only thing they really share are like test results and x-rays. That's it. But, actual treatment and diagnosis, it sounds pretty obvious, but that'd be a good thing to share. Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's terrible. But, that's the state of healthcare. But guys like Terry and myself, we practice differently. There's much more communication with the patient and connection and a relationship. Obviously, look at what it's evolved, what your treatment with Terry has evolved into. So
sure.
That makes
It reminds me of a joke of how when cancer patients get their first diagnosis, they always say go to a second doctor. It's like, well, what if the second doctor says no? They don't have cancer. then are you dying or are you not? Do you go get treatment? And then do I go to a third doctor? Do they do rock, paper, scissors? What's going on?
No, I'm sure, Terry and I have been around for a long time. We'll get patients that come in that they come to us as a last ditch effort, kind of like you, Chris. I mean,
all the time.
They've been through the gamut of traditional medicine and they're going to try something called chiropractic or what have you, and they end up getting better. It's just a different perspective, a different look. Not using medication, but trying to use the body's own natural healing abilities. So that's the beauty of our profession. That I do have a confession that I don't know if even Terry knows about this. My lectures were so boring. They were all so clinical and flat, and I really just depended on some flair in my personality to get things going, but that didn't even work. And so I decided one day, in 2008, I was going through my stuff, but I saw an opportunity to go to a comedy club, the Improv. And I pull up to get pull-ups on the website to get tickets, and on the side column it said that Improv was offering comedy classes, and I go, oh, my lectures suck. Maybe I can make them a little better. And so I started this 6-week course, and
oh my God,
I didn't
know that.
Yeah, I did. I didn't know that to pass the class, you have to do a 5-minute stand up in front of a live audience. Chris, I have so much respect.
That's your final exam.
Right? I'd rather burn in a fire, but I was death-defied because it's so different than lecturing. You're like waiting for people. So I have so much respect for what you do that I even just got goosebumps thinking that if you did that if you do that on a frequent basis, even writing a storyline, to be entertaining, that is something. That's really. That's a challenge.
Yeah, when you're doing a lecture, people aren't drunk and and booing if they don't like what you're saying. It is different.
Well, you've never been to his lectures.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they're drunk, especially in Vegas. The subject in Vegas that I'm lecturing on is ethics, and I go, what? I had imposter's syndrome at that moment when I'm thinking about. I go, how am I going to lecture on ethics when the way I talk to my staff is so on the edge every time? But they know my intention.
I thought lectures on ethics were banned in Las Vegas. That's
He should be, huh?
It's like an irony tour. You're gonna in Vegas. You're gonna talk about ethics.
Oh, that's great. That is so true.
Were you when you first got on stage? I mean, you're still nervous. Aren't you still nervous when you come on stage? I mean, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, how do you manage that?
It's interesting. Like I've kind of the last couple of years. Well, every comedian's taken a break from stand-up for the last year and a half. But
seems that way.
I haven't done as much straight stand-up in a while, like going to an improv, doing a set, or anything like that. Like I've actually been doing either like live podcasts or guests on live podcasts. So it's more of like a show where it's an ensemble where you're up there just kind of joking around like this, like a live podcast. Where those I don't get nervous for because they're much more relaxed. If I'm doing a monologue that I haven't done yet, like new jokes, that I would definitely get a little bit nervous. But I think next time I do it, if I ever go back to just doing a straight monologue, I probably will because I haven't done it in a while. In fact, I talked to a couple of my comedian friends. We might actually do a show called like Welcome Back, where it's all comedians that haven't done monologues in like a couple of years, and just like a show, like bringing them all back together and like doing it like in Hollywood somewhere. But I'll let you guys know if we end up doing
you got to
show.
do that. Yeah. Yes. That would be sensational.
That would be good. Because I remember when we went to watch one of your shows, I was like, It is so funny because, I would see you in the office and I see how you are and you and I joke and have a good time. And then you got on stage. I'm like, oh my God, he's hilarious. And then I saw how you handle the hecklers. And I'm like, I will never heckle this guy in my office ever again.
Yeah. Man. And that's always like for a comedian, that's our least favorite thing to do because we have all this time we spend on creating material and an act and telling stories. And then we've got to waste it in some drunk asshole that's yelling shit in the front row. I'm like, he's like, you're taking up my time. So the anger you see when a comedian yelling at a heckler is genuine because it's someone who has taken away from what they've been trying to do.
Oh, that is great.
But you guys have to get good at that, and you have to.
You do, yeah.
You have to get good at that and have a thick skin and all that. But it's gotta eat at you over time.
It's a balancing act too, which is really interesting. Like you never think about how much thought actually goes into it with a heckler because if you are too mean to the heckler and they're just kind of drunk, the audience can actually turn on you. Where so you have to have this balance where you're making fun of the heckler shuts up and the audience is on your side. And I've seen comedians get that mix wrong and where the comedian was in the right, but the whole audience turns on them because they were too harsh to a drunk girl at a bachelorette party. So, so it's a weird thing to say, but there's a bit of a science to it.
Terry, we've had hecklers in our science-based lecture. There's always a doctor in the audience that's going to ask a question, and instead of asking a question, he makes a statement just because he wants to be heard, and you just sit there and go, whoa,
It's a very similar thing, but
I had a.
I'm curious
heckler.
to hear, like, give me an example of that. Like, what would a doctor say, like, to give you a heckle at a lecture?
Oh no, there was a remarkable one in Connecticut that. There was about 200 doctors in the audience, and I was lecturing on concussion, and I said something about that the science is just embarking, and the research is just embarking on a good, no carb diet with a good quality protein and a good source of fats for the first 24 to 72 hours after a concussion. And a doctor, basically the ketogenic diet. And a doctor raises his hand. I pick on the guy, and he goes, "Do you realize how hard it is to be on a ketogenic diet?" And now here was the problem. Whatever I said, whatever came out of my mouth, I had been working for the Miami Dolphins for 19 years. So you're around these testosterone-driven, multi-million-dollar athletes all day long. Well, I channeled my ghetto, and I said, I don't believe you're asking me that with that kind of attitude. I go, use your discretion. You're a doctor. And it was like me and him were the only ones in the audience. I realized, I said, you know what?
Right.
I just, I got thug on the guy. I needed to back off. and actually the doctors, fortunately, were on my side, like, wow, what a jerk, and so.
Because you always wonder, like, what happened to that guy 12 hours before he asked that question? Like, did something happen? We're like, this is the last day of my ketogenic diet. If one more person mentions it to me, I'm going to lose it. Yeah.
Oh, I know. You got to be fast on your feet. You got to think quick. I tell you got to have that good sense of humor, though.
And I think the training room helps a lot with that, but it is a different world. What you can get away with in the training room, you can't get in the lecture hall, and when you get in the lecture hall, you can't get away with in the office. And I think we've all fallen on our face so many damn times that it's not even crazy.
Big time.
And all I remember is when I went to one of your shows, I was like, oh God, he's gonna say, oh, my chiropractor's in the room, and he's gonna bring up a crack in the backs joke, and I'm gonna be hammered. And you never did, so I was really nice, but I also kept my mouth shut and go, I am not gonna say a damn word, because if I open it, he's gonna fillet me. But so you've also brought your kids in, and a lot of people don't realize that chiropractors take care of kids. What brought you? What had you come up with that idea? Because to bring the kids in, was it just because of the results you got, or how did that work?
It was actually a bit more of a roundabout way. Like when my daughter was getting older, it's like we were talking about before. You try a couple of different doctors, and then when chiropractors are sometimes your last stop. But the fact that you get there at all is good. Like my daughter was having jaw pain and TMJ, but like severe jaw pain, headaches to the point where we couldn't diagnose it. Like we took her to the dentist. We took her to actually the UCLA pain center. Like we kept getting referred to different doctors and nothing was really helping. And I was like, you know what? This is still muscles and joints and jaws, because the main thing the doctors were concerned with was there's something else underlying. Was there a nerve, something with nerves or something more serious going on? But when they ruled all that out, they weren't sure what was causing the pain because they didn't want to medicate her, which was good because she was young. So when we brought her to you, you were able to actually loosen up the jaws. Now, again, people think it's like a magic, just one treatment and then you're done. It's not that. It's a series of treatments to unlock the jaws and the muscles and the joints. And we came to you for, it was probably once a week for a while, or at least once every 2 weeks, just to kind of loosen everything up. And then as the treatments started working and the pain subsided, we were able to go down. And then part of it was also her still growing, the muscles getting bigger and the bones growing, and all of those things combined with the treatments, then she doesn't suffer from it anymore.
Yeah,
that is great.
And your son gives the best damn hugs, by the way. Every time he gets off the table, he gives the best hugs. I love your kids.
Yeah, they love coming in too. They love, coming in for treatments and, because they know it's going to be a fun, just a hangout session in addition to getting treated for something that hurts.
Is there, Chris, you've got both of us, we're going to wrap this up so you can go because I know you're busy, but you have both of us. Is there anything that you think being out there that you want to ask us that being a comedian or writer, a incredible man you are and podcaster, is there stuff that you think that needs to be, that you want to ask of us or needs to be told out there?
That's a good question. One of the things that we had already kind of touched on and talked about, and now I'm going to sneak in a plug to one of my podcasts into this, is a overall approach to holistic health. Like, there's no one silver bullet. Like even with like anxiety, the chiropractic treatments were great, and I really they helped tremendously, and they were probably driving all the improvements. But if I didn't combine that with other relaxation and cognitive health things, like it wouldn't have been as effective. Like I don't think chiropractic care, just like any kind of healthcare on your body, should be an island. Like all of that, like you always taught me that it's a holistic approach to your body healing itself. Well, that means you have to do more than one thing.
Yeah.
You have to exercise and eat well. And one of the things I wanted to do to kind of give back with people with anxieties, I started a new podcast called The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood, which is a storytelling, comedy, sleep aid, science, anti-anxiety podcast. So I combined all these things that I love. And it's me as a professor explorer telling stories going like under the ocean or up into a cloud city, but it's combined with like a soothing narration, sound effects, and music to help people kind of tone down their anxiety and help them actually go to sleep. So I've gotten some nice emails saying, look, I've been up with insomnia. It's this kind of, I put this on, it brings it down a bunch of notches and I'm able to drift off to sleep. So please keep making them. So I feel like too, like what we're all doing is, we're getting help, put more things out there in the world that can help more people because we've received the help. Pay it forward. So that's
I love
one of the
that.
things.
I think we can end on that. Can you say that podcast one more time so people can look it up?
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood.
Oh, Chris, I can't thank you enough. I love you to death and your family. And thank you for sharing your stories with my buddy Spence here. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, if it wasn't for you, this podcast would never be here. You and I have gone for lunch. You've told me what equipment to buy. You've been one of my mentors in this whole journey here. And it's an honor to have you here looking at you and have you being part of our podcast. And I think with all 2021 and 20, all the anxiety, God, if your podcast can help those people sleep and get help, that's just great. So thank you from the bottom of our heart for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure. And thanks for making me and my family feel better.
Love it.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. You can find announcements and more on our Instagram at the Crackin' Backs Podcast. Give us a follow and let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in every Monday and Wednesday for a new episode at 7 a.m. CST. See you next time.